Hello everyone who just likes to tinker with your stuff until it is the best stuff possible. I am BorderWise and welcome to a Let's Build in From the Depths. We haven't done these in a very, very long time. I don't really have a good reason why. We've just kind of been focusing on other stuff. But this is effectively a kind of... I forget what episode we're on with the Steel Sovereigns playthrough, but a kind of intermission with that because I keep meaning to upgrade my stuff, and I have not upgraded my stuff, and by gum, it's time to upgrade the stuff. So, the stuff we are upgrading here is the Icicle. I call it a destroyer. Honestly, it's more of a battlecruiser, I suppose. The comment section is, dubbed it that, because this thing, sometimes in From the Depths, you just get a winning campaign design. It's a craft that punches above its weight and is just super reliable, and it does the things you've needed to do. I'm slightly embarrassed to say, out of the many craft I've built over the years, there are not a hell of a lot of craft which fit that title, because there's usually just one or two per campaign. Actually, in Steel Sovereigns, it's the 6,000 hours I've spent in this bloody game is finally starting to show itself, because there's a few craft like that. The Icicle, however, is probably the most standout. This thing has been incredibly reliable in being able to handle various threats. It's just a useful generalist, as you would expect for something that's armed entirely with advanced cannons. And yeah, it is a glass cannon on top of that, alloy and wood, which means super light, super floaty, reasonably durable so long as the fight doesn't last too long and it's not fighting out of its weight class, so to speak. And just has armor-piercing shells that rip things to pieces, and that's really nice. Also, lots of active defense, lots to like here. So, since this thing has done such exemplary service, not just in the Steel Sovereigns, but also in playtesting of me custom campaign, Plutono, why does it need an upgrade? Well, it's not perfect. Very few things are perfect. In fact, nothing's perfect, pretty much anywhere. But especially in From the Depths, there's pretty much... It's very hard to make something that's just flawless. Even the designs, which kind of seem to be, infallible, so to speak, that there's always something you can do. Even if you can't see it, then someone else who plays this game probably almost certainly will see it, and might tell you in the comment section. But I digress. What we're doing with the Icicle, firstly, you'll notice that the second gun from the front, there's a term for that, A, B, C, whatever. Whatever letter this particular turret has, it's always been a little bit underwhelming. It's kind of been like a secondary main gun firing. It's had a bit of variation. It was, I've messed around with a lot, as you do with designs. But it was always a little bit underwhelming in the damage it put out, and I've decided to replace it with something very much like the second gun from the back, which is, actually originally was a cram cannon, which, really didn't do a hell of a lot. Unfortunately, cram at this size is generally not very good. It doesn't do anything better than the same size of advanced cannon. What we're doing instead, we replace that with a quad 50mm AP heat combination CWIS. It's a CWIS that shoots the small, fast stuff and also missiles, and that works incredibly well. That thing dishes out Docker like crazy, and this is basically just a smaller version of that, so, which works out pretty well, I feel. Just means it puts way more shells downrange. It is funnier with advanced cannons. Sometimes it is better to fling lots of smaller shells. In fact, a lot of the time it's better to fling lots of smaller shells, rather than having, a few shells fired slowly. That's not really what APS is good at, unless it's an absolute monster of a railgun, but that's not what we're doing here. So this went pretty well. Unfortunately, with belt feeders, there's no real such thing as, the Tetris is kind of, simplistic compared to if you're using 2-meter loaders and, bigger. But yeah, probably don't even really need to have two separate APS systems in here, but I like doing that just for redundancy's sake, so that if one firing piece gets destroyed, it's not the whole turret isn't suddenly rendered completely useless. Your mileage may vary on that. This thing has turned out pretty well. We're gonna get to it further along in the video, but like also the very smallest turrets on this I also felt were a little bit underwhelming. They dished out the same kind of AP heat as CIWS. By the way, AP heat is not the most effective CIWS shell. It is, however, good enough, especially if you have lots of guns like it. And AP heat is just a very, very good shell type at pretty much any gauge you care to name. So it means if it's shooting at aircraft, it like is instant death to them. In particular, in Steel Sovereigns, a lot of craft are very vulnerable to heat simply because they're made very compactly, and a lot of them don't even have spaced armor. I say a lot of them. The more heavier, advanced craft, of course, do have spaced armor, and so the Icicle doesn't ruffle stomp them quite as much as it does other things. But AP heat is still damn good. Like, and using it as like using an AP heat gun to shoot down missiles isn't that ineffective, provided you have enough kinetic damage, and the heat shell doesn't really do anything to missiles. But like it works, like I said, well enough. If a really good CIWS shell, in case anyone's wondering, is just, I don't know, a railgun CIWS, something with like a heavy head but does a lot of kinetic damage and fires really fast, like what the Megalodon is packing. That CIWS is darn good. And you'll see here I'm fiddling around and just making sure that this thing has the triple controller setup that I like to use for CIWS these days. And for anyone who doesn't know what I'm doing here, there's 3 controllers on this thing. One is your regular local weapon controller, all in one, and that controls the gun for the most part. It just, shoots at things which are distant, and that has the lowest priority. The second highest priority is the CIWS controller itself, which shoots at missiles and crams and all that kind of stuff. And then the third local weapon controller is set to quite a short range, about 500 meters is what I usually do. And that is the highest priority, and that is for dealing with anything that is getting too close. So we're talking like little bombers, but in particular suicide craft. So if nukes or something come in, or ramming craft, the thing that's working as CIWS will suddenly switch to shooting at the oncoming thing, which is probably a bigger threat than like any kind of missile ever could be. And especially because the Icicle, just with that spinny decoy on top of it, that is one of the smarter things I've ever done on a craft, and I really should make that standard issue on all my ships, is that radar heat decoy that spins just absolutely shuts down swarms of radar or infrared missiles. Just, it's almost cruel how easily it just shreds them. And then, of course, the CIWS and the missile interceptors in the bow and stern can then just annihilate the missile swarm at leisure. It's really good. Remember, decoys are not foolproof. They just buy you a lot of time if you're mounting them on something that isn't a super fast jet fighter or something like that. So yeah, that's the whole idea there. I was talking about the other small guns. They're doing pretty good, but since we have this extra beefy 3-in-1 close-in weapon defense now on the front, replacing the kind of meh main gun, the plan was, and well, I guess it ends up being that way. The thumbnail's probably given it already. I want to swap these in with max gauge diff guns, simply because I am very fond these days of the whole Alpha Strike thing. I used to be quite skeptical of like relying on Alpha Strikes too much, and I still am to a little extent. You can't rely on them completely, but the great thing about direct input fed APS, not just CIWS, is that it is comparatively cheap for how much damage it can do. Sure, you'll only really get a few shots off, but if those shots are like 10-meter long 500mm shells that are, especially if they're APHE, my goodness, it makes a huge difference, especially if you set up their AI right. You'll see there are combat tests incoming. I do think I actually worked really quickly here. Thankfully, this is the difference between what you're seeing here. This is me thinking ahead of time what I want to do. Compare that to all the other Let's Builds I've done where I'm kind of fumbling and just thinking about it as I'm doing it. This went quite fast. In about an hour, because, like, in case you haven't noticed, this footage is sped up by ×2. In about an hour, I managed to not only upgrade this thing, I combat tested it, like, twice, or, like, 3 times? I forget how many times. I combat tested it multiple times, and then tweaked it some more. So, there's something to be said for, like, giving it some serious thought about what you want to do, and not just making it up on the day, as I tend to do a lot. So see here, I'm thinking, how do? And yeah, so as for what else I'm looking to upgrade, I'm probably going to upgrade the snowboarders as well. So I mentioned before, sometimes you just hit upon a winning campaign design, something that just does what it's supposed to do really well. The snowboarder is like that. If for those of you who haven't been following the Steel Sovereigns, firstly, what the hell are you doing? That series is actually really fun. I'm loving it. It's a damn good custom campaign, so well done to the people working on it. This is just the demo, and I'm having a blast with it. And also being tested, because it is on the hardest difficulty, and I'm not sure it's as hard as Neater, but it is different from Neater. If you're used to fighting Neater designs, Steel Sovereign's designs definitely, they have a different feel to them. They have a different emphasis, so to speak. There's lots of glass cannons, which means things which are very fast, very cheap, have quite noticeable levels of firepower. So you have to out-DPS a lot of those things, and like more so than in Neater, I suppose. But yeah, I'm still not decided on which campaign is harder, or whether the custom campaign or the OG campaign, whether either of them are harder than the other. Like, I'm not sure. If anyone is in the comments who works on Steel Sovereigns, do share like what difficulty you're aiming for with that campaign, because I would love to know. Yeah, it would be very interesting to hear from the creators. But yeah, like, it's the snowboarder. So, for those of you who have not been following, the snowboarder is an air superiority fighter. It is armed with, what is it? I think it's 30mm heat shells and small incendiary missiles, and it does a pretty good job. It is a pretty good fly swatter. You throw that thing at an aircraft that is, I don't know, its size or perhaps a little bit bigger, it does really, really well. It puts heat shells straight into the ammo and fuel, and it causes it to burn up or blow up respectively. And if the missiles can hit, they sizzle, sizzle, barbecued plain, yum, 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 eat them right up. The problem with the snowboarder is that she is lacking a bit in firepower against larger targets, and sometimes, because the snowboarder is by far and away the fastest craft I currently have in Steel Sovereigns, she is also having to do double duty as my fast response unit, which is not ideal, because those little 30mm heat shells work great against small planes. They don't work very well against ships, or against airships, which have proper spaced armor. And the missiles, I don't know, there need to be more of them to make more of an impact, because little incendiary missiles, especially if they're infrared guided, they're damn effective, but you do need to really swarm them. So the plan with the snowboarders is to basically extend the ammo department, the ammo compartment, like, again. I've done that before, actually, or at least, no, I haven't. That was my failed upgrade attempt that happened off camera. So it's to extend the ammo compartment, and I might actually add a laser to it. Or I might get rid of the missiles altogether and really lean into the APS. I might have to rebuild them from scratch. I'm hoping not to. I think possibly what I could do is have a mixture of fighters in a snowboarder squadron. So I could have a laser fighter, I could have a heat fighter and a missile fighter, and just separate out their roles a little bit. That probably would be a pretty good idea. In fact, now I think about it, I think that's what I'm going to do. Like, let me know if you think that's a good idea. A little, rather than like having a squad of like 3 identical planes spawn in, we should have like 3 planes, each doing the air superiority role and like fast response role, but doing it slightly differently. So, laser fighter, missile fighter, gunfighter, so to speak. Because, like, there are airborne targets, and just small targets in general. All of those things have pros and cons to them. Like, lasers are really good at, like, cooking small targets, but, yeah, it's a bit of an issue. Bit of an issue against larger targets, anything that's smoked, and of course the gunfighter, absolutely great. More reliable damage than lasers or missiles, but will struggle against anything with decent armor, with proper armor, so to speak. And of course, the missiles is missiles. If the missiles can hit, great. And if they can't hit, oh no, that's bad. So, I think, yeah, rather than having one fighter that can do everything, it's like having 3 specialized fighters just spawn in a squad. I think that'll be really cool. Yeah. And while I've been prattling on, you'll probably notice that we're accomplishing something with this diff gun here. It's not the most heavily armored thing. I'm probably going to have to do something with the top of that. But honestly, like, this gun, because it's so cheap, there's, like, one of the most expensive parts of APS guns is the loaders. The auto loaders, and to a lesser extent the clips. If it has no loaders and has no clips, the thing is bloody cheap. And it does look a little bit silly, I guess, just have these big guns slung down below. And actually, no, it doesn't look that silly. It just looks silly that the turret gap is smaller. And yeah, this is me just re-establishing everything, and that fires, it looks good. The barrels aren't actually long enough for full propellant burn on these things, annoyingly, so... And it's also me remembering, like, oh right, this should not be Seawers. This should not be Seawers at all. That's not its job anymore. That's the problem with doing things. With turning what was a secondary weapon into a primary weapon. I think we are going to roll with this. We're going to roll with it a little bit. Part of the reason for this upgrade, or this retrofit, I guess, is that the Icicle, because so much, like 3 out of the 5 turrets actually, on it, were dedicated to Seawers, which means that if missiles kept being thrown at it, its damage against the enemy craft would kind of fall off. And that's not good, because the best way to kill an enemy craft, well, the best way to defend yourself against enemy craft is to kill it before it gets too many shots off. Especially for something like this that is mostly made out of wood. Very important. And, of course, we test against an Alcazar, because that's important. And firing them AP shells. I think, actually, at this point, it's Hesh. I'm trying to remember now. Yeah, so this is where I noticed that the guns are... The shells are not keeping up with each other, and so there's something funny here. This is the point where I realize the muzzle velocity is not correct. So you have to go in here, and I need to reload everything, and need to make sure, yep, double checking. This is why you gotta check all the stats of the shell before you finalize the gun, so to speak. And you gotta do the thing, you know, you gotta do that. One of the advantages, by the way, like, a word on the theme of this whole light pale fleet. This is kind of a themed fleet. I like themed fleets. I made a whole spreadsheet on, like, a binary, like, armor combinations, like, where you primarily use just, like, 1 or 2 materials. Stupid idea, by the way, don't do that. But it's, like, kind of fun. It's gimmicky and silly, and I kind of have been having a lot of fun with it. And also, I really want to, like, playtest for realsies, so to speak. Like, how different weapon and armor, like, combinations, like, work out, like, pros and cons of them. Alloy and wood is not a particularly good armor combination. It's way too fragile, really. And using alloy like that, kind of, you lose one major... It's basically worst of both worlds. They're kind of redundant because both wood and alloy are really floaty. Alloy is quite expensive for the actual armor value that it provides. And, yeah, like, it basically means the alloy makes the thing more expensive, which counteracts the advantage of building with wood. And building with wood is kind of pointless because the alloy is super floaty anyway. You might as well build with stone instead. So I'm looking forward to, like, building stuff that's a combination of alloy and stone. And as for the theme of it, like, it's all, like, snow and ice themed, that's just because I decided to paint this white. There was no particular rhyme or reason to that. Not everything is logical. And I think... Yeah, I missed it on screen because it went too fast. But yeah, this is me testing, seeing AP shells rather than Hesh. I keep forgetting about Hesh. Shout out to John McFist, who, actual name James, rose to the challenge of taking on the Pyre with an old tournament design. And basically modified it a little bit, and it absolutely clobbers the Pyre. So, for those of you who are taking on the Pyre challenge, of building something that can solo the pyre, be aware it is very vulnerable to big, meaty Hesh shells. And it's I kind of touched on that a little bit, both in the Most Wanted, I did it on the pyre ages ago, but also in the Great Talons overview, is that because it doesn't have a LAMS, like big chunky APS shells, it doesn't really have much of a direct defense against that, apart from the shields. And of course, if you mix disruptors in with your meaty Hesh shells, we're talking meaty Hesh shells, as in like something that's 500 millimeters, and half of the shell is just HE warheads to make the Hesh really squashy, if you know what I mean. Literally squash the pirates. Great fun. Alright, so here we are at the first combat test, because in order for this to be a proper upgrade, it does need to be able to beat the original Icicle. In this particular case, I don't think it does. And one thing you need to know about the the Icicle, is that the thing's a crazy girl. The thing will constantly move towards the target, and the reason for that is I wanted to bum rush things, and I wanted to stay within range, not to get too far, and also just that is quite helpful against other broadsiders, because the Icicle is quite fast, and when it closes in like that, it means that other ships with circling or broadside behavior will try and run away, which means they'll turn their stern towards her, and then she just rips them up from behind. And this test isn't going so well for the upgrade. In fact, you can really see it's not going very well. The original Icicle has a noticeable health lead. And part of the reason for that is that the Icicle's main guns, actually all of its weapons, are set to go for hot blocks. And there's pros and cons with that, but with slow-firing weapons, that's not particularly smart, especially against something like the Icicle that actually has heat decoys spinning on top of the superstructure. Not the smartest thing to do. So I'm going back here and thinking like, all right, we gotta think this through, guys. We gotta have a thinky think. What can we does here? What can we does is. What are you doing here? Right, go into the main menu. I think, what do you do, past BorderWise? Sometimes the most simple of changes can make a big difference here. And so what I do here is... What do I do here? I think what is done here is... I don't actually remember. We've gotten to the point of the video where I don't remember what happened. I basically changed the block targeting for the main weapons from hot blocks to clusters of blocks, which is much more useful for something like big diff guns like this, or for the Sabo gun, that is the Sabo frag gun, that is the other main armament, that is the biggest turret on this thing. That makes a big difference, and it's just aiming for clusters of blocks like that. And then we try that again, and this... I think I restart this one, because once again they try and crash into each other and make sweet sugary love on the battlefield. Very inappropriate. Monetization, demonetization inbound. Jolly terrible. And now you see that the health lead is more noticeable. And that is what we like to see here, is that... yeah, that is what we like. Bonk. Oh dear. Oh dear. So this is a problem with a mirror match like this, with two craft that want to... They don't ram, but they do go full steam ahead and just want to friggin' do stuff. And also, I'm starting to think that maybe it's a good idea to put hover movement on literally every single vehicle, because strafing is wonderful. Having a craft that can do multiple things like that, and... Right there, we get a lovely opening shot from those diff guns. And in particular, one thing, well, in this particular case, if it starts by facing the enemy, the advantage of those diff guns is that the first one fires, and then the second one, has time to build up some decent detection as well. So, if you want to build good diff guns, it actually helps a little bit to know something about building crams, because they're kind of similar in a lot of ways. You have to make every shot count, and also you need to, which means you've got to know your detection, you've got to know your block targeting very well. They can't focus too long on any particular block, because If they do, they could end up shooting at something stupid, and that's like, yeah, that is a successful test. I'm happy. Cluster block targeting works very well for the upgrade. And now, I'm having to think about the last thing I want to do, which is to put a laser on this thing. Because, as much as I love the Icicle, she's doing sterling service, she does struggle a little bit against things like small planes at a distance. Her APS is really good and is kind of optimized for things that are approaching. But when you get a death spiring plane, it really helps just to slap a laser on it to kind of finish it off, so to speak. So, yeah, the plan here is just basically put some kind of laser on it. And I was thinking to put a separate laser system here, but I'm gonna take a risk. And I have mixed feelings about mixed offensive and defensive laser systems by, like, attaching combiners to something that's also attached to LAMS nodes. There's advantages and there's disadvantages to it. The advantage is, of course, that you save a hell of a lot of materials, and the whole thing's more compact because you don't have two separate laser systems on it. Basically, when the LAMS isn't busy, the laser combiner means that that material isn't really wasted. It's like busy shooting the thing, which is generally more useful anyway. But it also means that if you really need that LAMS to be fully charged, it won't be. And it means that if the LAMS is busy, the offensive laser like loses power, so it's not great. It's not great. The reason I'm doing it here is because the LAMS on the Icicle is just kind of an emergency measure anyway. It's really just there to snipe anything that managed to get through all the other things that it has. So it has the heat and radar decoys. It has, well, now it has two pretty beefy Sea-Whiz guns, and it has missile interceptors. And then the LAMS is just last line of defense, zapping anything that gets past that. So I feel fairly confident that we can have a laser here, and I'm having to get very creative where this bloody laser actually sits. This superstructure is quite fraught, I do have to say. There's a lot of things on it. That's where the LAMS nodes are, it's where the 360 detection is, and now there's a laser turret on it. And I kind of like the superstructure. I don't recommend building this. You do want superstructure to be big and hollow and bulky, so it can take multiple armor-piercing shots straight through it and laugh it off. But I kind of like how organic the superstructure on the Icicle is, because it's kind of grown. It's just like upgrade after upgrade. Like, you know, I've added a diff gun, and then I added a proper... what's the term for it? Not cockpit. What's it called? A proper bridge for Rambok to sit in. And now I'm adding a little laser turret off that, and which does need its own AI. So now I'm hunting around inside this already quite cramped ship to figure out, like, where can I stick that freaking AI, and I decide to put it right here since this is where the repair bot and the repair tentacle already are. Just one repair bot, one repair tentacle, don't need to go nuts. So long as your craft has at least one of each, that is okay. You don't want to go too mental on either of those, unless you're doing something specific in mind. Because both of those things are expensive, and you don't want to rely on either one too much, because that is more expensive than just building a properly designed ship with proper active defenses. Speaking from bitter experience, if your main defense is repair bot spam, you are going to be burning through materials very quickly. It is a common mistake that new players make. You don't want to rely on that too much. It's all well for the Twin Guard to do that, because they are nanomachines, son, with their frickin' repair tentacles. Gods, I hate them. But if you do it, especially if you're playing on a harder difficulty, you're gonna run out of materials pretty quickly. A decent LAMS to shoot down the shells, or Sea-Whiz, or Interceptor, even bloody Interceptor spam. You use less materials than just repairing metal or alloy blocks over and over. Also, this is the point where I'm hopping on Patreon to see who can I name this AI after, because that is a perk on my Patreon. Is what is it, like Silver Dollar Space Ranger and above? Gods, why did I name it these things? Basically, if you're giving more than $5 a month, I will, like, basically name drop you in my videos, which usually means naming AIs after people, because that's the most convenient thing. So yeah, like last data, congratulations, you are in charge of this laser. Don't let us down now. And I immediately look at this and think like, alright, so the laser bulge, yes I am going to call it that, that's a little bit too... we have to figure this out. Oh, we have to figure this out. So there's, alright, so actually no, I remember what I'm doing now. The thing does need its own detection, because if you turn all the other weapons off, all the trackers are going to, well... I think they just stopped tracking. I might need to double check that. I've never noticed that, actually. I should probably check it. But just a little AR seeker plus 360 detection is usually enough for a little secondary laser. So those sharp-eyed among you might probably already be noticing something important about the position of this laser, and in particular the position of the spinny thing right over the top of it, and that is what happens if it shoots straight up. And right there I've also put some movement, some behavior on it as well, because that's very important. Like, I am very much a fan of like having redundant AI all with redundant behaviors as well, because it means even if like 2 out of 3 AIs on this are blown up, the ship can still move at the very least, and that's very, very handy. And I just realized I've just done that wrong. This is why combat testing frequently throughout your building process or your retrofitting process is very, very good, because it is by far the fastest way to spot any mistakes you've made. If the thing's not functioning right, you can see it very quickly once you spawn little planes in. So this thing is doing its lasery thing quite nicely. And I am planning in the campaign, unless we are actually dealing with swarms of little bastards, I am going to turn the laser off, because you can do that. Like, there's no getting around it. Like, in the campaign, it does help to micromanage your craft a little bit, just a smidge, to ensure they don't do anything particularly stupid. And yeah, this is the point where I realize, alright, so if this thing aims straight up, it is actually going to be shooting at the spinny thing. And that's not good. So the solution to that, or at the very least to make it less bad, is to extend the laser bulge. The rearward-facing laser bulge, what the laser sit on, which has its own trials and tribulations, because you would have noticed, the eagle-eyed among you would have noticed, that I have put the local weapon controller like in the actual... essentially the mast of the thing. So now that has to find a new home. Where's that gonna go? It can't go down there because the laser transceiver is currently there, and that's absolutely no bloody good at all. So where do, how do? Answer is it has to go on the turret itself, because this is a tiny little, not even a secondary, this is a tertiary weapon. It just needs enough armor to like shrug off like a flak round or two, and this is precisely what applique was made for. I could probably deco this to make it look a little bit less ugly. Maybe I could make it look like a 360 radar or something. That would be pretty cool. But anyway, it has a hat now. We are pleased to announce that this thing has a hat, and we're just tidying up the laser bulge. Yes, I am going to keep calling it that, even though probably some of you want me to stop. And that's another advantage to building with alloy, is that you can have funky shapes like that, and it doesn't absolutely ruin the balance of the thing. So now I'm going to test it against everyone's favorite carrier, the Tortuga. So, the Icicle, just to begin with, like, this thing ruffle stomps the Tortuga to begin with, but now with the upgrades, it really ruffle stomps the Tortuga. Like, 32,000 HE damage, you can see there, just with 2 chunky Seawers on there. And this is another combat test that's very handy. By default, that little laser prefab I use is set to hold fire when the cavity is below 50% charge. And, yeah, not good enough. But now you can see the thing is managing to barbecue things quite nicely, although some of that might have been the shells. Yep, there we go. So now the Icicle is ready. Is ready indeed for continued service. And I think it is just a nice upgrade all around. I should probably do more aesthetic tweaks, but we'll see how that goes. We'll see if I feel like it. And I won't save over the original Icicle yet, because this retrofitted version does need to prove itself in campaign. It is unfortunately a little bit more expensive, because heavy barrels, more firing pieces, that little laser on top. So yeah, but yeah, as you can see here, it is quite a large craft. It is bigger than the Tortuga. But yeah, it does damn well. I'm proud of this thing. I am proud of what I've done with the Icicle. And I'm looking forward to, well, I'm taking screenshots of the thing. That's how proud I am, clearly. But yeah, I am looking forward so much to making this thing even better and continuing to fight through campaigns with it. Like, I feel the Icicle is one of those things. It's just a darn good ship. It's good at what it does. Like, below 300k ship. For those of you who don't know, when you're playing the campaign, it's good to have something like a 40k, like, starting craft that is versatile and does the job. A 300k, kind of, just after starting craft. And then after that you can get into, like, a 1 million, 2 million material craft, which is kind of your in-game trump card, so to speak. So, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed me retrofitting me Battlecruiser. I think this really is a Battlecruiser now. I'm not sure it was ever a destroyer. Really, like, ship categories are hard. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Please like, follow, and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Support me on Patreon or YouTube membership if you like. It really helps, and there's fun perks in it for you. Like the aforementioned, you get AIs, mainframes named after you, if you're at the second tier, but even on the first tier, $1 a month, you get to hang out with me and other cool people in the exclusive Patreon Discord. And do check out my other channels, BorderRRR and Border Art, and, like, come to my Twitch streams. I'll be happy to see you. They're fun. I am apparently very good background noise to build ships to, or draw to, or what have you. So, hopefully, see you all there, and farewell!